Some stories are so disturbing, they seem like fiction, tales that twist the imagination and haunt our dreams. But sometimes, the most chilling stories are not born from fantasy, but from the darkest corners of reality itself. The most terrifying tales are true, unfolding in places that seem safe, in towns that look just like any other. Evil, it turns out, can thrive in the most ordinary settings. Ed Gein was a quiet handyman from a small Wisconsin town, a man whose outward appearance gave little hint of the darkness within. He blended into the background, a face in the crowd, unnoticed and unremarkable. To neighbors, he was odd but harmless, a loner perhaps, but never a threat. He exchanged polite greetings, kept to himself, and rarely drew attention. No one suspected the horrors hidden in his isolated farmhouse, standing alone on the edge of town. Its peeling paint and shuttered windows concealed secrets that would shock the world. His name became synonymous with a unique, gruesome horror that still shocks us today. The headlines screamed of unspeakable acts, and the world recoiled in disbelief. Gein's crimes blurred the line between reality and nightmare. His obsession wasn't just murder, but a twisted fascination with the dead. He collected trophies, turning the macabre into a way of life. He violated graves, turning the sanctity of death into something grotesque. The cemetery became his hunting ground, and the dead, his victims. This wasn't the work of a typical killer. It was a descent into madness, a journey into a mind warped by isolation and obsession. It was something darker, from the deepest corners of the human mind, a place where empathy is lost and horror takes root. Ed Gein's story forces us to confront the unsettling truth. Monsters can live next door, wearing the most ordinary faces. The line between normalcy and evil is thinner than we'd like to believe. While only confirmed to have killed 2 people, the bizarre nature of his other acts set him apart from other infamous killers. His crimes inspired countless books, films, and nightmares. His life is a study in psychological decay, marked by isolation, a toxic mother-son bond, and a break from reality. The seeds of horror were planted early, growing in the shadows of his lonely childhood. Decades later, our fascination with Gein hasn't faded. His story continues to haunt popular culture, a cautionary tale of what can happen when darkness goes unnoticed. True crime culture keeps his legend alive, dissecting every detail, searching for answers that may never come. The horror lies not just in his acts, but in the quiet, unassuming man who committed them. Evil, it seems, can wear the most familiar mask. Ed Gein remains a chilling reminder of the darkness that can exist beneath the surface of any community, a warning that sometimes, the most terrifying monsters are the ones we never see coming. Ed Gein's crimes inspired some of horror's most iconic villains. Norman Bates in Psycho mirrored Gein's twisted relationship with his mother, even keeping her corpse and adopting her persona. Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre wore masks made of human skin, a direct nod to Gein's gruesome creations. Buffalo Bill in The Silence of the Lambs murdered women to craft a woman's suit, echoing Gein's own bizarre ambitions. These films transformed Gein's real-life horrors into enduring nightmares, cementing his legacy as the muse of monsters. He became the prototype for a new kind of villain, the quiet, broken man hiding unspeakable darkness. Gein's story proved that truth can be far more unsettling than fiction. Ed Gein was born in 1906 in the small rural town of La Crosse, Wisconsin, the second son of George and Augusta Gein. His early years were marked by the harsh realities of farm life and the rigid expectations of his family. His father, George, was a weak alcoholic figure, unable to provide stability or affection. He was dominated by Augusta, a puritanical, deeply religious and controlling mother who saw the world as sinful and corrupt. In 1914, Augusta moved the family to a remote, isolated farmstead in Plainfield, Wisconsin. She believed that by cutting off her sons from the outside world, she could protect them from what she saw as the evils of modern society. The boys were allowed out only for school, and even then, their contact with others was limited. Each day, they returned home to strict routines and daily Bible readings, filled with fire and brimstone sermons that painted the world as a place of constant danger and temptation. Augusta's goal was to shield her sons from evil, especially women, whom she saw as corrupting influences, except for herself, whom she considered pure and righteous. She lectured them constantly about morality and sin. The farm became a prison, its walls closing in on Ed and Henry. The isolation and constant fear shaped Ed's mind, leaving him lonely, anxious, and deeply dependent on his mother's approval. In 1940, George died, leaving Augusta's control over the family unchecked and absolute. The loss of their father only deepened the boys' dependence on their mother. Ed and his brother Henry, now adults, remained under her thumb, their world shrinking with each passing year. They worked the farm, rarely venturing beyond its boundaries, their lives dictated by Augusta's strict rules. The seeds of future horror were sown in the barren, joyless soil of the Gein family farm, where love was scarce and fear was ever present. This isolation and relentless control would have devastating consequences, setting the stage for one of the most disturbing stories in American history. Augusta Gein was the dominant force in Ed's life, instilling in him a fanatical fear of sin. She was a strict, puritanical woman who believed that the world was inherently evil and that women, in particular, were the root of all sin. Ed absorbed her teachings completely, developing a warped, obsessive attachment to her. He grew up in an environment where he was constantly reminded of the dangers of the outside world and the wickedness of women. He saw Augusta as both a divine figure and a source of terror, craving her approval but never earning it. This created a deep-seated conflict within him, as he both loved and feared his mother. She discouraged friendships and forbade contact with women, keeping Ed emotionally stunted and isolated. He was not allowed to form any bonds outside of his relationship with her, which left him incredibly lonely. Ed became her shadow, living only to serve and please her. His entire existence revolved around her, and he had no sense of self outside of his role as her obedient son. This toxic bond left him unable to form relationships with anyone else. He was socially awkward and found it difficult to connect with people, further isolating him from the world. Augusta's constant lectures about sin and anatomy fueled Ed's morbid curiosity about the female body. She would read to him from the Bible and other religious texts, emphasizing the sinful nature of women. The conflict between sacred and profane became deeply rooted in his psyche. He was torn between his mother's teachings and his own natural curiosities, creating a dangerous internal struggle. Augusta tried to create a pure son, but instead forged a monster, one obsessed with her and haunted by repression. Her attempts to shield him from the world only served to warp his mind further. Her twisted devotion shaped the horrors to come, leaving a legacy of fear, obsession, and darkness that would haunt Ed for the rest of his life. Tension grew between Ed and his older brother Henry, who saw Augusta's influence as toxic. Henry planned to escape the farm, but on May 16, 1944, a brush fire changed everything. After the fire, Ed reported Henry missing, then led searchers directly to his brother's body. The official cause was asphyxiation, but Henry was found in unburned ground with suspicious head bruises. Authorities ruled it an accident, eager to close the case. Years later, after Ed's crimes were revealed, many suspected Henry was Ed's first victim. Henry's criticism of Augusta may have been the final straw. With Henry gone, Ed was left alone with his domineering mother. The last hope of breaking Augusta's hold vanished. Ed's descent into madness accelerated. After Henry's death, Ed became Augusta's sole caretaker as her health declined. Her death in 1945 devastated Ed, leaving him utterly alone for the first time. He preserved her rooms as shrines, boarding them up and letting the rest of the house decay. Ed confined himself to a small area, living in filth and isolation. The farmhouse became a tomb for both Augusta and Ed's sanity. To outsiders, Ed was a harmless eccentric, quiet, odd, sometimes babysitting for neighbors. He shared morbid trivia, but no one suspected the darkness within. Ed's profound loneliness and grief pushed him further from reality. The world his mother warned him about now seemed empty and terrifying. His mental collapse was complete, hidden behind the walls of his silent house. No one imagined the horrors that would soon be revealed. Ed Gein's solitude became the breeding ground for unspeakable acts. Alone, Ed's obsession spiraled into grave robbing. He targeted the graves of women resembling his mother, exhuming corpses under cover of night. Ed dismembered bodies, taking remains home to experiment with human anatomy. He tanned skin to create household items and clothing, chairs, masks, even a woman's suit. His goal, to become his mother, to bring her back in the most grotesque way. The farmhouse filled with macabre creations, skull bowls, skin lampshades, and more. Ed's ritualistic acts were attempts to reconstruct his mother's presence. Eventually, grave robbing wasn't enough. He murdered Mary Hogan and Bernice Worden, both middle-aged women like Augusta. Ed crossed the line from desecrator to killer, supplying his twisted projects with fresh victims. The horrors inside his home were about to be exposed. On November 16, 1957, Bernice Worden vanished from her hardware store. Her son, a deputy, found a trail of blood and recalled Ed Gein's visit. Police searched Gein's farmhouse, discovering Bernice's mutilated body hanging in a shed. Inside, they found a nightmare: furniture and trinkets made from human remains, preserved faces, and Mary Hogan's head. The sheer volume of body parts stunned investigators. Gein calmly confessed to the murders and grave robbing, describing his acts with chilling detachment. News of the House of Horrors spread rapidly, shocking the world. The quiet handyman was unmasked as a monster of unimaginable depravity. The small town of Plainfield became infamous overnight. The reality of Gein's crimes forced the world to confront true evil. The Ed Gein case horrified and fascinated the nation. His farmhouse became a symbol of evil, drawing crowds until it mysteriously burned down. Gein was found insane and committed, later tried and returned to a mental institution, where he died in 1984. He's buried in an unmarked grave, near the ones he once desecrated. Gein's legacy is a chilling study in how isolation and abuse can create a monster. Criminologists and psychologists still analyze his life, seeking answers. He wasn't driven by rage or greed, but by a desperate need to reconnect with his mother. Gein's story became modern folklore, inspiring fictional monsters that haunt our nightmares. The most frightening stories aren't about ghosts, they're about the people we think we know. Ed Gein reminds us, sometimes the real monster is the quiet neighbor next door,